Legacy Builders, Strategies for Building Successful Family Enterprises. Brought to you by Beacon Family Office at Asante Financial Management Limited. I'm your host, Corey Gagnon, Senior Wealth Advisor, and on this show, we explore global ideas, concepts, and models that help family enterprises better navigate the complexities of family wealth. Today, we welcome Anna Giampà, Chief Learning and Development Officer at Crysalia. Anna brings over 20 years of consulting experience to support clients with complex needs. She has held leadership roles in the non-for-profit sector, serving as executive director, and in academia as lecturer at John Molson School of Business. An accomplished entrepreneur, Anna co-manages a real estate portfolio and is known for her integrity and collaborative style. She balances her impressive career with active community involvement, serving on non-for-profit boards and dedicating time to causes close to her heart. My goal is to be the most curious person in today's conversation with Anna Giampà, where we explore her experience in guiding enterprising families through complex decisions and multi-generational challenges. We'll discuss how Anna's journey from growing up in a family business to her work at Crysalia has shaped her approach to family advising, focusing on strategic alignment, active listening, and understanding each family's unique circumstances. Together, we'll uncover the importance of balancing emotion and strategy, integrating diverse perspectives, and fostering harmony across family, ownership, and business circles. Now, let's dive in. Welcome, Anna. We're excited to have you here today to share your wealth of knowledge and experiences with us. Let's dive in, shall we?
Absolutely. Thanks for having me, Corey.
Anna, imagine you're delivering the commencement speech to the graduating class of 2024, and you have the chance to inspire them with your story. How would you begin your speech to convey incredible lessons and expertise that you've gained along your career?
Well, that's a tough question, Corey. But when I think about it, I kind of identified three pivotal moments in my life, in my career, three stages in my life where I really took away some lessons, and those lessons are valuable for me today. So ultimately, it comes down to understanding emotion and the importance of emotional dynamics, not only in family enterprise, because that's what we're kind of focusing on today, but in life in general. So I would start by saying kind of, things like, don't let emotions be a downfall, but kind of leverage emotion and the power that it can have in life and in your enterprising family. So I can go a little bit more detail on what I mean by that, but that's kind of where my head goes when you ask me that question.
Great. And so second part then?
Yeah. So if I think about the stages and we all are familiar with the interfacing life cycles and life stages that enterprising families go through. For me, it was kind of three moments, that inspired me and that continue to kind of serve as lessons for me. So in childhood and youth, I really was absorbed by what I saw around me. I had the privilege of growing up in an enterprising family. So I have lots of lived experience that really fueled my passion for entrepreneurship, and a couple of takeaways from that period in my life. As a young adult and as I started my life together with my husband, whom I've been with for over 31 years, in that young adult phase, we were a young dynamic couple. We were starting businesses together. We had a common passion, and I had the chance during that phase as well to share my expertise as a lecturer and professional adjunct in the area of entrepreneurship for over 15 years. In that phase, I learned something else. So every phase was kind of building on each other. And I'll tell you a little bit about what I learned in all of those phases. And just to bring me back to where I am today, or where I was a couple of years ago, which is a point in my midlife, where I realized that, I have an unrelenting desire to leverage my composite career, my versatile knowledge, my love for family enterprise, and I wanted to do something more with that. So after having had a conversation with a colleague, piqued my interest in the FEA certification. At the time, I was kind of doing family enterprise advisory on my own or as a complement to other things that I was doing. I was often working with entrepreneurs, but it was at a point, some point last year, where I decided, well, I want to do this full time. I want to be able to help not only the occasional client, but I want to be able to leverage all of that and help clients be really successful, not only in their enterprises, but in their families as well. So, and that's where I joined Crysalia. But in terms of the takeaways, I just wanted to give you the background on those phases. But in terms of the takeaways in each of those phases, my parents really taught me that the emotional part of having a business, you can't ignore that. So we were a small family owned and operated business. They understood very early that, the importance of the people behind the business, the importance of contributing to community. So the business really became a backdrop for my life. So whether I was helping out at the cash register or studying in the back room, the family business was there for me in so many different ways. And we were there for so many different people. I thought at the time that we had something unique. Again, I'm talking about being a young child, maybe early teens, and realizing, wow, this is amazing what we have here. There's passion. I see the hard work. I see how they inspire others to do good. And I thought that was unique. And I said, okay, the winning formula, they must have it. I know what it is. It's love, and love for what they did, for what they did as a couple, what they did for clients, what they did for employees, and what we did for the community. So I thought it was unique, and maybe it was unique in itself because, compared to other family businesses, we would hear horror stories of fighting and things like that. But I was really proud to say that I learned from them to leverage the emotional component and not let it hinder your advancement and your success. And I have to say, I actually continue to learn that from my in-laws as well. My husband and I have been together since I was an early teen. So I saw them do the same thing in their family business. So really important to understand that at the heart of it, it's the people, and at the heart of the people, well, it's the emotion and it's the love that kind of glues everything together. As I moved on, as I said, I went into having an entrepreneurial career path with my husband. What I learned in that second phase was that you need to make space, not only for rising generation. In the case of my husband, he was kind of involved in taking over his father's business and what that meant, kind of how do you navigate that, but also making space for external people. Like, I was not a family member, but I was called in to be an advisor for their family, and bringing that external perspective was truly valuable. But I think even to a greater degree, I learned from being in business with my husband to really leverage our complementarity. We were very different. I mean, we are very different. So he thought that I was too analytical, too structured, too critical of his new ideas. And I always thought, well, he's too creative, or spends too much time networking. There's so much work to do. Why is he doing that? But we started off where the friction, the differences created friction for us. And luckily, it didn't take us that long to realize that we were better served by really leveraging each other's value in terms of how we complemented each other. So it was from that point on, it's kind of a little, similar to what you see in Tuckman's team development model. We did a little bit of storming, a little bit of norming, but then we eventually reached a point where we were a high performing team in our own family enterprise, which is in real estate development. And from then on, we are not only leveraging each other's skill sets to create value for our business, but also adding on additional people to our team to be able to really have that high performance. So, it really resonated with me, understanding that, we don't have to be the same to be great. In fact, we probably will be greater if we are different. And that was a really key moment for me. And then, as I said, lastly, it was kind of like, a couple of years ago when I was, interested in pursuing the FIA certification, that I was really trying to leverage, well, how can I take all of this passion that I have and all of this experience and help other families navigate some of those challenges and some of those pitfalls, maybe try to help them avoid some of that storming and norming phase and go straight to high performance by avoiding some of the things. So really, 3 key phases and 3 key lessons. And the third one is kind of like alignment, channel it in unison. If you can have alignment within a family, you're most likely going to succeed. And that's kind of where my angle with strategy comes in as well, where it's like, okay, strategic planning, you want to make sure that you're doing the right things, but you're also not doing the wrong things. And so bringing that level of strategic advisory to families has also been kind of a takeaway from my experience having lived it, and saying, okay, well, now I can help others by applying this principle.
Awesome. Wow. All right. Let's dive into some of that, because some great stories there. And I think there's more great ones that we can uncover. So I love the heart and emotion within your beginning experiences. I had very similar growing up, where I was at a very young age, not even able to walk. I was in the family business as my mother and grandmother were running the business. So completely understand the studying in the back room and whatnot. So tell me that heart and emotion. Where have you seen that beyond what your parents have? Because you talked about that you thought that was the key, and in some cases, I think it is. If all businesses did have that, I think the world would be a better place. So where have you seen that in some of the work that you've done, Anna?
I agree. And I think probably a lot of families have that. It might be articulated in different ways. I think what was different in my family, or what stood out to me, was how they never let the business get in the way of the family. So sometimes what we see with families is that and again, this will vary depending on the size and nature of the business. And there are, peaks and valleys in terms of intensity and busyness and all of that.
Yeah.
But for my parents, and I would have to say my in-laws as well, family time was family time. And yes, we could technically talk about the business all the time, but we didn't. So Sunday night family dinners were for family time. And so they were very good at separating what was the appropriate time to communicate and to talk about business versus family time, when it was about family time. So I find today the families that we work with, where at least the older generations can appreciate that, again, because of different life cycles, people are at different points in their lives. And so although they may be consumed by the business or where it's going, they appreciating that the next generations or the rising generations have other things also going on at the same time, where the business may not be as core to them necessarily as to the previous generation, just making space for other stuff. I think that's what really, for me, is where I see that love and that emotional component, making space for it. And I feel that those families that can do that effectively, and sometimes with our help, are able to really go a lot farther in terms of not only the business, but the family.
Right. Anna, you mentioned the community and what that meant in the family business as you were growing up. And then you also made a comment about your husband spending so much time networking. And it makes me question some of that social capital that you've experienced in both those enterprises. How do you apply that today?
Right. Well, I mean, at Crysalia, we're all about helping build that human capital, and of course, capital goes beyond financial, and it includes the social and the relationships and all of that. I hate to admit that maybe I learned that a little bit too late in life, where I was so focused on achieving and on make sure the business was successful, that I would occasionally overlook or neglect the fact that, well, building relationships and networking and talking to as many people as you can, which is my husband's strength, is essential to success as well. So, we definitely see it today. Again, where today, and not only in my enterprising guy, but you see a little bit more of that ability to do both to the degree that makes you comfortable. So for me, I'll do it to a certain degree, but not to the same degree that he will. And again, because of that, we're able to complement each other. So in families where you see that, the various perspectives or the diverse perspectives, the diverse personalities, this is one of the areas where it might shine through, where we're assessing or helping families kind of understand other individual perspectives and understanding the why, but making sure that ultimately they have a shared why. So, our methods to get there may be slightly different, and what we need as our winning conditions may be slightly different, but ultimately we're kind of, forging ahead towards a common goal. And that's where I see it today, is that I see that it goes beyond the practicality. It's more about, okay, what are we striving for?
Right. And so balancing that strategy and the work that's not very easy, but easier to quantify, versus developing some of those non-financial capitals that support the strategy. How do you balance those and really know where you are and moving the needle on both those?
couple of things that come to mind when you ask that. I think, when it comes to strategy, again, I've worked the greater part of my career working with entrepreneurs, helping them to implement strategy for their business. And that's always kind of an accepted thing. Well, of course, we need a strategy for our business, right? Everybody can accept that. But what I was hoping to do is say, okay, well, now we have the strategy for the business, but we have 3 circles here. How about applying strategy to the other circles? So we're seeing more and more today, families coming to us, asking us to help start a family office or to formalize their family office. And in a sense, this is like, starting a new business. It's a new entity. So we can start from scratch and create a business plan for the family office or a strategic plan. But oftentimes it's important. And we say to them, listen, take a step back and let's figure out the strategy for the family. You're going into an intangible kind of circle. If you don't have a kind of a clear path of, what the vision, the values, and the guiding principles for the family are, how can you create a strategic plan for a family office, right? So my perspective was kind of like, yes, I'm structured, and yes, there's always a place for structure in order to be successful. But at the same time, it has to marry well. It has to overlap also in the areas where strategy is not necessarily kind of the first thing you think about when you think of the family circle. You don't think of strategy, right? But in the office, we often say, well, strategic planning is like breathing. We don't need to be told how to breathe. We all do it. We know how to do it. It's a physiological process that happens in our bodies. But we also know that if we are mindful and intentional about the way we breathe, the benefits can be huge, right? So the same thing applies for strategic planning. We know that enterprising families do it probably as second nature. But if they are mindful about strategic planning, specifically in the family and the ownership circles, then the benefits and the impact can be so much greater.
Right. Absolutely. And some of that work, I want to go back to your comment about making space the rising generation, as you mentioned in your family situation, but also making space for those others. So when doing some of that work, how do you ensure that there's space left for that?
Yeah, that's a really good question. I mean, at the core of approach is really making sure that individual perspectives are heard. So at the get-go, when we're working with families, there needs to be that acceptance that, well, as part of this process, we will be hearing from everybody to make sure that there is alignment, or to make sure that if there are tension points and conflict areas, we can resolve them. But it's not about kind of formulating a plan for the whole unless we've already taken into consideration the individual perspectives. So to go back to your question, so I think from the get-go, if families appreciate that in the approach we are making space for individual perspectives, then there is more of an inclination to then accept what those perspectives are. If you're starting off from a point where and it happens, right? Where families, it could be the G1, G2, doesn't matter, where there's a very kind of resistance to outsiders, or resistance to, even advisors, right? Like, how can we know how best to advise this family? We have never lived in this family. Who are we
Right.
to do this? But I think it's kind of reinforcing the value of perspectives, diversity of perspective, diversity of ages, diversity of thought can only enrich a conversation, can only enrich what the outcome could be. And sometimes, just the fact of having that neutral third party, the advisor, come in and share that, there have been studies that have shown that, you can know something for a long time, but if an advisor comes in or a third party comes in and tells you something, a different part of the brain is activated, different processes in the brain are at work. And so sometimes it'll be that trigger to be able to see something more clearly, to accept something, and then to be able to act upon it. So I guess it's a combination of kind of instilling in the families that we work with that diversity brings value, but then also kind of reinforcing that with, well, the credibility that the way that we do it is, making sure that all are heard, and that, we're not we're not doing any harm in the process. It's only to improve the situation or to maintain it if it's already good.
Right. Absolutely. And so thinking about leveraging each other and leveraging the people within the family, how do you build that into the strategic plan and make sure that there's that ability for them to feel high performing as a family?
Oftentimes, it really starts with kind of asking individuals, what their desired future looks like, and so it could be obvious at the business level what the future of the business should look like or could look like. But when you're bringing it down to the individual level, or even at what would you like the desired, well, what is the desired future for this family or for the wealth that we hold? Then the conversations become a little bit different. So it's really by honing in and asking the right kind of questions to get to the root of, well, what is the essence of this individual, and how is that going to be a component of the collective picture? So it's just, making sure that the conversations are candid, are honest, are transparent, and that they feel like they have the possibility to really be open and honest, right? Because ultimately, if the strategic plan for the family or the family office or even the business doesn't really reflect what you're truly feeling and thinking, then there's no guarantees that it will work.
Right. And how far out, if we're talking about the family or the family office, how far out are we thinking as far as a vision?
That's a good question. And that will really depend. And I think you've probably heard this answer before. It really depends on the nature of the operation. Let's say, there could be different raison d'être for the family office. So it really varies. What we're seeing more and more of today is that really that desire to formalize what already has existed as a family office function. Per se. And in that formalization process, we're seeing that they want to be able to chart out, 5 or 10 years down the line in terms of a vision. And obviously, in terms of the operating strategy, that's a whole different story. But in terms of the vision, I think that, a 5-year outlook, even 10-year outlook can work very well for a family office.
Right. And comes to adding people. I like when you talk about the business in you've got a high performing team, and now let's make space for people. How about when it comes from family or the family office? Now we're talking about generations. How do we adapt as we go further into generations?
Yeah, and I think that's probably newer territory for most. I would say that again, the openness to bringing outsiders has to be there before you can even start to consider what those roles might be. It's hard to say, but I think we're seeing more and more of it. We're seeing that, they're in that formalization process, then bringing in professional managers who can manage the different aspects of the family office in a different way than the family may be able to do that, or upskilling the family members so that they can actually carry out the roles and responsibilities that they want to have. So again, it goes back to having that individual perspectives. And what we often do is kind of do like a family portrait to understand, well, okay, not only do we know what you'd like to do, but now we can also assess what you're capable of doing and where you may need some development to be able to kind of jump into a role that you may not be ready for today. So in terms of diversity, I mean, yes, it could be external professional managers. It could be kind of, again, bringing in generations that you wouldn't think are quite ready, but starting that learning and development early enough that they can jump in when the time is right.
Right. And now for each family member and each family, I'm sure it depends, and the timing is dependent on them. But what would be some best practices, Anna, of, we have this in our vision, our strategic plan kind of shows that maybe there will be a gap and we'll need some expertise in this area. How would, thinking of maybe a rising gen family member listening, how would they say, maybe I want to develop those skills and I can see forward that the family will need these skills? How would they go about doing that?
First, as I said, in our family portrait, we would kind of be able to do kind of a good assessment of not only desires, but also skills and competencies to build that starting strategic plan or plan for the family office. But then I think it's essential that there's a refresh of that strategy on an annual basis to see, how have things shifted? Have things changed? Are individual capabilities different than they were maybe a year ago, or desires different than they were a year ago? So I think it's about being proactive about what it is that you put out there as your objectives and your goals for your family office, if we're talking about a family office or your family, and then kind of making sure that you stay on top of that to make sure that it's always current. It's an evolving plan. It's not something that's static, it's dynamic, and you have to make sure that you're adapting to whatever happens, not only external externally, but maybe what's happening internally as well. So it's a matter of kind of being adaptive to the evolution of things.
Right. And so when it comes to the desires of the family members, you know, desires might be outside of the kind of main concentration of the family. And there might be other passions and something that's guiding that family member away from kind of the core of what's binding the family. How does the family support that to ensure that that person thrives within their area?
And there too, I think that's an emerging area in terms of how to deal with it. I think it's always existed. I think there's always been kind of that desire to maybe do something different, break away from what the family does. But I think we're putting more structure around that. We've heard the concepts of family bank, where there'd be allocated pool of funds, where be it for entrepreneurial ventures or other types of activities that rising generations might be interested in. We're seeing more and more of that being implemented. But it can be as simple as kind of, just the policies, the governance, the investment policies that you have, or the types of ways that you make decisions that can kind of reinforce those aspirations, or can steer them in a different direction if it doesn't fit what the family has decided is the way. But again, if there diversity, or if when there is kind of like something, an outlier that has to be addressed, the key thing is to make sure that that perspective is heard. How you decide to incorporate it or not is a different story, but the essential part is really making sure that you're aware, because sometimes they're not even aware that there's this desire to do something different. So it's kind of scratching the surface and making sure you're getting down to understanding the individuals that make up a family.
Right. Absolutely. And so if we think about bringing that back in and talking about alignment and what that looks like, if we've got many different family members, sometimes they're not even geographically together, and now we're talking about bringing them together. What does it look like, or how would somebody feel if they said, I feel like our family's in alignment? Our ownership group, maybe we're getting to that point where we're not as connected, but now we've been working with some of these advisors, and these different people have come in to help, and now we feel like, this is aligned, and we're feeling good about our family and our ownership group.
I think, for the most part, what you'll see as evidence of that is, more harmonious kind of relations, as a whole in general, overarching better feeling in the family. But in terms of more specific things, in terms of ownership, just a sense of clarity. I think oftentimes the lack of alignment, or the misalignment, comes from the fact that things are not necessarily clearly understood by all in the same way, or are not interpreted by all in the same way. So where we want to see alignment is not only in terms of direction that we're going in, but also alignment in our understanding of the situation, of the status quo, the context, of the options for the future. So alignment comes often in a kind of a sense of, I would say, a sense of relief, or a sense of kind of satisfaction with your level of comfort or knowledge or appreciation for a certain context that your family is facing, and to boot, then the better dynamics in as a whole.
Right. And going back to your work that you had done for 15 years, and thinking about that business side of things. So, the family has that alignment. There's that harmonious relationships amongst them. The ownership group understands what's going on. What does this now mean? Maybe there's an operating business, or maybe there's, whatever sort of operations there are. But what can that do for the operations?
I think it can only kind of position the operating business to do better, like poised for more growth and more solidity. I think having that clarity, that alignment outside of the business circle enables the family members who are working in the business to kind of have a stronger sense of common goal type of thing, of what they're doing. So often you see, you expect to see the opposite. You expect to see that, alignment in the business circle carries over into the other circles. But I don't think that's as easily done as the other way around. I think it's, if you have the alignment in the ownership and in the family, then alignment in the business becomes a little bit easier to get to. Not always, obviously, I'm generalizing, but in terms of my experience, I think we often want to start with the business circle when we have a business background and when we come into it with our business experience. And that's a good place to start if the issues that are urgent and important are in the business. But what we're seeing today with the clients that I see today, it's not so much about the business anymore, and it's more about the other circles. And so we see the ripple effects of the benefits in that business circle, but we're really starting from a different point.
Right. Yes, absolutely. And so thinking about the business being in a good place, and they've, be it the non-family members that are there are doing a great job, and now there's time to focus on these other things, because that's kind of what I heard from you is the business is in a great place and maybe we don't need to focus on it as much, and now we have the ability to focus on the other things. How does that benefit the family unit, kind of looking forward? Like, what can that freedom allow for the family?
I think, and I think you're absolutely right. I'm not sure if I said it or not, but it is often the case. Typically, you would see that they'll only start to think about these other issues when the business is in a good place. But it could also be that there has been another type of trigger, an unexpected event that forces you to look at those circles today, where you weren't planning to look at those circles until much later. So I think, in terms of the benefit that it could have for the other circle, I mean, starting early is never a bad thing. You can never start too early. I think that's the name of the game, is in terms of transition planning, or kind of incorporating the rising gens from a very early. We're doing some work with some clients where, even though they're minors, we're setting up some learning and development for them, whether it means understanding what the history of the family is, or understanding what it means to have wealth and the responsibility that comes with it, understanding philanthropy, understanding how they can provide value to their family. We can start that from a very young age, so that you don't have to get to the point where only when the business is in a good place can I start to think about and have these conversations for the other circles. I think it's the best case scenario would be to start even when your business is not in a great place, because then you're dealing with some of the difficult issues that can be enlightening even to a younger generation to understand. Because you see, I said before, like I saw my parents, grow a business. I saw the good stuff and the bad stuff, right? There are difficult moments in there where if you're not privy to those moments and you're not kind of involved in them indirectly even, then you don't have as much of an appreciation for what it took to have the success that came along with it. So I think, I'm not sure if I'm answering your question, but I think what I'm trying to say is that, the sooner you can integrate family, whether it's in the business or in the other circles, having the conversations, getting their perspectives, showing them that there is an important part of understanding where they're coming from and where they'd like to go, then that can only really have ripple effects that are beneficial for all of the circles.
Right. And so there's some family biases that come around of talking about wealth with children. And some people might be thinking of, focusing on philanthropy and what it means, this wealth that the family has with our minor children. might not be what we want to do. You know, I also believe that starting early is a great thing. And so can you help just as far as what it means for that emotional well-being of that family member starting early, and maybe even some of the identity that can that strong sense of identity that can be formed by focusing earlier on, because I think there's some benefits there.
Yeah, I think there are several benefits. I think, for the early generation that's being integrated for early on. I mean, it's as you said, that sense of identity becomes more solidified by the fact that they know more and are engaged in some of the conversations that surround the enterprising family, but also for the generation that the in place where they're bringing in the rising generation. There's a sense of satisfaction, I think, that's rewarding to be able to say, I didn't overlook that until it was time that I needed to do it. I did it proactively. I think
Right.
there's a sense of kind of feeling satisfied and happy and proud of the fact that you're being proactive about integrating the next generation in preparation for future transitions. And uh, that's it. So it's twofold. It goes both ways, I think, and it's a win-win when
Yeah.
of course, when there's a desire. It could be there could be situations depending on the age where there is a lack of interest, or where because of other circumstances there's not so much of a desire to be involved. But when there is a desire and when it's mutual, then I think it's really a win-win situation.
Love it. That is a great place to transition as we near the end of our conversation. Anna, there's a few questions that I ask each guest before we wrap up. Are you ready for the tough ones?
Oh boy, let's go. Yeah, sure.
All right. What is one key strategy you believe is most essential for building a successful family enterprise?
Yeah, I think I have to go down to my structure and my need for process and structure. I think governance is a strategy. I think as a whole, having a governance that is appropriate for the business, that is in line with what the business needs or the family needs, but also that can evolve as the family evolves. It just helps with making decisions more effectively, more clearly in a way. Sharing information more in a more aligned and proactive way, and then of course conflict resolution, because we want to have families who are loving and all the time, but we know that in reality that's not always the case. So having governance in place that can help with, having formal processes in place to help with conflict resolution, I think are strategies that can only help the family. I don't think, the only time having governance being a bad thing for a family if it's too heavy to maintain, if it's too demanding to be able to carry out. But if you have a simple governance structure that is, clearly understood and communicated to all, it can only be beneficial as a strategy for a family.
Absolutely. And what is the most common challenge that you see family enterprises encountering when it comes to wealth transition and generational continuity?
I think we kind of talked about it a little bit, but for me, it's really like the lack of preparedness, or the fact that you're not communicating everything that you could be communicating. And I want to say should, but could
Right.
be communicating from an earlier point. So I think oftentimes families are reactive because of so many other things that make it that they're not able to plan ahead and to communicate early. But even in terms of kind of transition, as I said before, start as early as you can. There's no too early. There's no too soon a time to integrate the next gen. Involve all of the stakeholders that are involved, and that includes non-family members who may be part of the transition some way or some, in another, and make sure that you're, as I said earlier, dedicating the required training and mentorship when it's desired and when it fits the profile of the individuals, to be able to kind of progress in a logical way, so that kind of that confidence, not only the skills, but the confidence to be able to jump into a role kind of comes with that as well. So communication is key. Starting early is key. Yeah.
Awesome. I love it. And lots of strategies there. So that was great. And in your experience, what are the top three key qualities that successful family enterprise leaders possess?
I mean, these may be ones you've heard other people say before, and it wouldn't surprise me. But I did, I, I thought about this the other day because I had a feeling you would ask this kind of question. So, um, for me, I think, three things: visionary thinking. So not only visionary, again, in terms of the business, because that's usually where we start with that from, but also visionary enough to inspire others. So it's not only about the vision, but getting other people on board. So I think that's critical. And in the case of family enterprise, getting family on board, right? Emotional intelligence. So, for sure that includes things like empathy and ability to manage relationships, which I talked a little bit about before, but also I think to a greater extent, self-awareness. So emotional intelligence and meaning, do I really know myself? If I really know myself, then I can endeavor to know others, and then I can endeavor to know the situation, and I can endeavor to do this. And then lastly, I think this probably, leaders, but I think probably anybody needs to be adaptable. I think, the circumstances in business and families change. So being able to not only kind of innovate, but also sometimes having to pivot altogether into either completely different businesses or different ways of dealing with family dynamics issues, finding new solutions and finding kind of ways to achieve long-term success in different ways. I think adaptability is key as well.
Awesome. That's great. Yes, sometimes we do hear the same things, but I love that you elaborated a little bit more as some of those nuances are key. I think we can throw EQ out there and say it's a thing, but really understanding what does that mean?
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. And before we conclude our discussion, I'd like to highlight where our listeners can engage in more conversations that you're having or conversations that you're participating in that maybe thought leaders are that you're following.
Sure. I mean, in terms of our thought leadership, Crysalia puts out a regular blog, which I help to curate. We have our newsletter, which you can sign up on crysalia.ca, and that's open to our enterprising family community. And then, of course, we are going to be participating in some panels and series. It's a series of panels and conferences in the upcoming months. So all of that is available on our website and in our newsletter. So yeah, you can see what we're thinking and what we're doing by kind of signing up and staying in tune with what's new.
Perfect. And I wanted to make sure that we covered everything today. Is there anything else that you'd like to share with our audience that maybe we didn't get a chance to touch on?
I think that's pretty much it.
Great.
Yeah, I think we're good.
All right. Awesome. Well, thank you, Anna. I appreciate you taking the time to share your expertise and, years of experiences with us today. Your insights have been incredibly valuable to me, and I know that our listeners will find one or two good nuggets in our conversation. So thank you so much for contributing to our episode.
Thank you so much, Corey. It was a great pleasure to be with you today.
As we wrap up this episode, we invite you to reflect on the insights Anna has shared about family enterprise strategy and the value of an integrated approach to family alignment. Whether you are part of a family enterprise or provide consulting to family enterprises, Anna's experiences highlight how powerful it can be when we focus on open communication, diverse perspectives, and strategic planning across all family circles. Throughout our discussion with Anna, we explored key aspects of managing family enterprises. We talked about the importance of balancing business strategy with family dynamic and how crucial it is to plan strategically across all of the circles. We also discussed the benefits of early engagement with younger generations and fostering open communication among family members. Anna emphasized that maintaining family alignment is just as vital as developing the enterprise itself. These insights offer practical approaches for families aiming to create harmony, build a strong identity, and navigate the unique challenges of sustaining a family enterprise across generations. For those seeking additional guidance on navigating the complexities of family enterprise strategy and alignment, Anna Giampà and the team at Crysalia are ready to assist. You can reach out to her via the Crysalia website, and we've included her contact information together with additional resources in the show notes to support you on your journey. Thank you for joining me, Corey Gagnon, your host of Legacy Builders Podcast. It's my personal passion to explore with you these topics related to family wealth. If you enjoyed today's episode, you can subscribe on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, or your preferred podcast platform. And don't forget to share this episode with family, friends, and colleagues who you care about. If you'd like to help support this show, you can do so by leaving a rating and review. If you have any questions about anything shared on today's episode, or have topics you'd like us to dive deeper into in future episodes, please let us know by emailing beaconfamilyoffice@asante.com. That's beaconfamilyoffice@assante.com. Legacy Builders, Strategies for Building Successful Family Enterprises is brought to you by Beacon Family Office at Asante. Are you worried about losing what you've created and seeking ways to transition your wealth across generations? Beacon Family Office at Asante supports our clients transition their wealth while maintaining relationships. If you'd like to access more content we've created, you can visit us at beaconfamilyoffice.com or for more details on our services and book an initial call. Thanks again for listening, and until next episode, stay intentional about building your legacy. This program was prepared by Corey Gagnon, who is a senior wealth advisor with Beacon Family Office at Asante Financial Management Limited. This is not an official program of Asante Financial Management, and the statements and opinions expressed during this podcast are not necessarily those of Asante Financial Management. This show is intended for general information only and may not apply to all listeners or investors. Please obtain professional financial advice or contact us at beaconfamilyoffice@asante.com or visit beaconfamilyoffice.com to discuss your particular circumstances prior to acting on the information presented.